Ladies and gentlemen, this weather just sucks, is what it does. It just straight sucks. Got off work today though. You know, they called school off because of inclement weather, you know, icy roads and stuff like that. But this is what we're dealing with today in East Tennessee. High of like 29, wind blowing, snow, just crappy weather. And you know, I would have went fishing. I really would have, except for the simple fact that I don't think I would have caught anything just because of how crazy this weather is. You know, what you got to realize about East Tennessee is that this isn't normal. And so with it being as extremely cold as it has been, with as much weather as we've had, and then rain. See, before the snow came, it rained like crazy, so it muddies up the water. And then those cold temperatures make the water cold, and cold, muddy water is probably one of the single hardest things to go catch a fish in. And so today I thought, you know what? It's not worth it. But what is worth it is to come hang out in the beer barn with you guys, change some hooks on some baits, smoke some chicken in the smoker, and just hang out and make some content with you guys and just chill and do what I do. So yeah, fishing is coming. Like I said, I really believe the next few weeks we're gonna be where we need to be to catch some fish. And I've got a really big kayak tournament coming up. 3rd week of February, I'm actually fishing the Hobie Open. So that will be a giant kayak tournament. It's probably the most high-level kayak tournament that I've ever fished in. So we'll be fishing in that thing, 2-day event. And so we got some fishing coming down the pipe. We just got to get rid of this white bullshit that keeps falling out of the sky. But yeah, so that's what we're doing. And hopefully you guys will enjoy today's episode. So I did end up actually going fishing Saturday. Didn't do super good. Went and did a little dam discharge fishing with my buddies, Mr. Michael and Anthony. And you know, we put some fish into the boat. Ended up catching a pretty good smallmouth, a decent little spot, and then a really strung out largemouth. And I actually hooked a gar with a rock crawler, which was pretty crazy. I've never done that before. But you know, it's one of those things that gives me hope because it makes me kind of realize how close we actually are to it really going down. And that's kind of what I was talking about with Michael and Anthony. You know, water was 45, 46 degrees. Just as soon as we hit us a streak of days where it warms up just a little bit and that water hits like that 50 to 51, those big smallmouth are going to start moving up and get ready to do the boogie. But we had a good time, and it kind of looked just a little something like this. The picture of last night came from right in here.
Was the water ripping more?
Yeah. Yeah, more than it is right now, but I mean, this is plenty of current. I mean, it ain't like...
It's not moving.
There we go.
Yeah?
I got something. Yep, that's a big one. Oh no, it's not, it's a little one. Yeah. Spot.
Oh, hell yeah.
There we go. First fish of the day. Yeah, the camera's on there, yeah. We got some fish there. Fish in the boat.
Don't you know?
Don't you know? Don't you know? Lord have mercy there, eh? He really got them there hooks. I'm gonna have to change them hooks because it broke there, eh?
Really?
Yeah, it broke off right in his mouth there. Lord have mercy. Well, hell. There you go. Spotolungus. See you, buddy.
That thing is...
We got him. That's a gar. I got a gar.
You got a gar?
Yep. Net, please. I have never in my life caught a gar on a crankbait. I have done some crap in my day. There he goes. God, he's off. I have done some crap in my day. And I ain't never once done that crap right there. Lord have mercy. There he is, buddy. Get him. Get him. Yep, that's a big smallmouth. Yeah, you do. Just get him up into me.
Oh, shit. Nice fucking fish, dude. Look at the ballot on.
That's why we came up in here.
What a fish.
Good job, buddy.
I believe that's my PB, buddy.
Is it? Good job, bud. $363.
What is he?
$363.
Nice fish, dude.
Good job, buddy. Want Peter?
Yeah.
Want Peter?
Yes, sir.
Get your Peter real quick. That's what we was trying to catch out in the current right there. See, that's what I was trying to catch out there in the currents. One's built like that right there. But they just ain't doing it today.
Oh, nice.
Heck yeah. I mean, Dad Jim there, boys.
And go.
Look at him. He's all jacked up, the poor thing. And he got a sore on his mouth and everything else.
You got herpes.
Lord of mercy. Not a super productive day, but we put some fish into the boat, and honestly, that's all that matters to me. It kind of gave me an idea of where they're at, what's going on, and kind of where they're going. I originally wanted to go to Chickamauga, but there ended up being like a 200 boat BFL there. I said, screw that. I'm not going to go deal with that because it's probably going to look like a parking lot. And I think something like 17 or 18 pounds ended up winning that thing. So not a very big bag at all for Chickamauga, which is just freaking crazy. But we caught some fish in the dam discharge, as you guys saw. First fish that I caught came on a Spro rock crawler, not in this color, but in a Spro rock crawler nonetheless. I was throwing a peanut butter and jelly color Spro rock crawler. Actually, unfortunately, ended up breaking that one off. Then I hooked that gar on another color Spro rock crawler. It's actually the Spro Rock Star. You guys have ever heard of them? Like, it's their crazier colors. They make just some really nutty colors in those, but it's a little fire tiger color. That's what I hooked that gar on, which, you know, ain't nobody wanting to go the gar hole anyway, so that doesn't really matter. And then both the smallmouth and that largemouth that we caught, we actually squirreled our way back up into a creek and started flipping a Strike King Rage Bug in Chameleon, little 5/16 ounce Beast Coast weight, and put some fish into the boat doing that, which was pretty crazy. It was one of those things that kind of told me that those fish, again, they're getting there. Are they there? No, but about 5-6 more degrees, and it's going to be amazing how when you go down through there, you'll catch 1 or 2 fish to catching 15 fish in a day, because a lot of those fish will move up to start getting ready to do their thing. Another thing that was working against us on this trip was the fact that we were coming off a full moon, and so that means that those fish were able to eat all night, feed during the night, and then just kind of chill out during the day and just soak up those UV rays. And we talked about that too. We talked about it with the biologists, kind of how important the day is for those fish, and warming those fishes up, getting that body moving, that by the end of the day, you know, they really focus on eating the last third of the day into the night, and then they just kind of chill out the rest of the day and get a little bit lockjaw. So yeah, that's what we did to put a few fish into the boat, a few at least. And so I don't know, I'm really kind of hopeful about this kayak tournament that I'm about to get into here in just a few weeks, but all at the same time I'm very nervous, because water levels have been very low, weather has been very cold, and it doesn't seem that it's going to get any better. And so it could either play out to be something really good, or it could play out to be something like an absolute struggle fest. And the thing is if it's a struggle fest, I would rather everybody struggle, because then it gives me the advantage of, if I do find some big ones, I'm going to be in a good position. But finding them and fishing on them for 2 days, 5 fish in a kayak over 2 days, 10 fish total, it's going to be interesting for sure. But one important thing I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about today is hooks, and the importance of good hooks, and how important it actually is to switch out the terminal tackle on whatever crankbait or hardbait that you happen to be throwing, or even if you're throwing a Texas rig, how important a good hook actually is to putting more fish into the boat. Because I think that's sometimes the biggest downfall of a lot of anglers, is they use stock terminal, and stock terminal on a lot of baits is good. Like your Spro rock crawlers, they come with Gamakatsu hooks, so for the most part I've never had an issue with those hooks. But stuff like 3XD, they're okay hooks, but they're not the best, and so I always end up switching those out. So I was going to talk to you guys kind of about what I switch my hooks out to, the sizes that I buy the most, and kind of what I look for in a good hook to make sure that I'm going to be able to put the most fish into the boat that I possibly can. So let's hop up here into the boat and let's talk hooks. Notice the banners, Lew's, AFCO. I'm going to have a new banner to hang actually in both of their places. It's going to have everything on it. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, so I guess the first thing that we need to talk about is the different styles of hooks. So we're going to talk about treble hooks, and then we're going to talk about like worm hooks and EWG worm hooks and all those kinds of things. So let's start with treble hooks. So you've really got two different types of treble hooks, really three if you think about it, but two main ones. Your EWG style treble hook, so a hook that has a bend that bends back in towards the shank of the hook. That's what's known as your extra wide gap. The reason it's called an extra wide gap is because it has literally an extra wide gap between the shank of the hook and the point of the hook. Oftentimes with EWG hooks as well, they're going to bend back towards the shank of the hook. And that style of hook, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, is a style of hook that the hookup ratio is a little bit lower, but when you do hook the fish, you've got them hooked, and it's going to be really hard for them to get any leverage on you and for them to be able to get off. The next type of hook is a round bend style of hook. And this, as you can see here, it has a round bend. It just has a traditional round bend in the hook. It is not extra wide in its gap or anything like that, and usually the hook point does not bend back towards the shank of the hook, or the part of the hook that actually attaches to the split ring. Like we'll talk about here in just a minute, these type of hooks, these traditional round bend styles of hooks, do a really good job of hooking fish when they slap at it or when they just kind of swap at it, but it doesn't do as good of a job of keeping those fish hooked when you do have them hooked. Now, am I saying that those hooks don't hook fish and keep fish hooked and you can't put them in the boat? Absolutely freaking not. Just like I'm not saying that an EWG isn't going to have, you know, as great of a hookup ratio, but it's just the nature of the hooks. When you really think about it and you look at certain situations, you'll probably catch 9 out of 10 fish, but that 1 out of 10 could be the big one that you need, and so having the right style of hook could be super important. And then you have hybrid hooks, and hybrid hooks are kind of an in-between. They're not really EWG, but they're not really just normal traditional round bend either. You know, these are going to kind of be your owner hooks, your duo hooks. There's a lot of different companies that kind of make these weird sort of in-between hooks that do the best of both worlds. And so when you start looking at hooks on the market, especially treble hooks, you're going to start seeing a bunch of different styles of hooks, a bunch of different shapes. And so knowing which one of those shapes to buy for which situation can be a little daunting, and I'm just kind of here to clear the air about what I think about treble hooks and which ones I think are the best. So as you guys can see, I have both EWG style and round bend style hooks on my crankbaits, as well as some of my crankbaits have some of those hybrid styles of hooks. So my philosophy behind treble hooks is EWG style hooks I like to use when the fish are really eating a bait really good. So what that means is they're not slapping at it, they're not just trying to kill it and come back and eat it, but they're actually intentionally trying to eat that bait, get it in their mouth and eat that bait. Because with treble hook style baits, a lot of the times what you'll find is that fish will just smash the crap out of them. Like they'll smash them against the bottom, or they'll go by and they'll smack them. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to kill or disable whatever they think it is, and then they're going to come back and they're going to eat it when it's not moving as quick as it is. And then other times they'll be like, you know, in the spring when fish get very intentional in what they're doing and their metabolism's a little bit more jacked up, they'll start directly trying to run down a crankbait or run down a direct bait, and they will actively open their mouth, try to suck that bait in and try to eat it, kind of like they would with a Texas rig or something like that. And so for me, I use the EWG style hooks when they are intentionally trying to eat that bait, because like I said, if a fish slaps at this hook, chances are they are going to get hooked either way. But with this more EWG style hook, where that point kind of wants to point back in towards the shank of that hook, just the design and, you know, the way that that hook is set up, it doesn't have as much travel or as much gap for that fish to be able to get a hold of, or for that hook to be able to grab onto that fish. And sometimes you won't get as good of a hookup if they just slap at it. But if they intentionally eat it and you drive this hook in, the style of that hook, the bend of that hook, the weight of that hook point kind of goes back towards the shank of that hook, it gives you a lot of leverage, but the fish not much leverage on you, and you just kind of get them pinned really, really well. The design of the hook is just a geometrical shape that is hard to get off of a fish. And I've seen many times when I'll have a fish hooked on an EWG hook just by like the fat of their mouth and just the simple design of the way that hook is made, it's very hard for them to get unhooked. And once you get them in the boat and start prodding around on them with a pair of pliers, it's hard to get that hook out of their face. And so I love an EWG style hook, especially when the fish are intentionally eating a bait and not just slapping at it. Now on the, you know, the kind of inverse of that, or the opposite of that, you've got your round bend hooks. And as you guys can see, I've got some round bend hooks on this rock crawler, and on most of my small body crankbaits, especially like that 3XD style of bait, I'm gonna have round bend hooks on there. And for the simple fact of that, this time of year, you know, cold winter months, lethargic fish all throughout the winter and really kind of into some of the spring, those fish are going to be slapping at these baits. You know, we use the brighter colors, the methylates, the oranges, those chartreuses, the greens this time of year for a reaction bite. We're getting those fish to react. Well, when they do react normally, they are just going to, Bobby! You hutch that up now, boy! They're going to just slap at that bait and they're going to try to kill it. And oftentimes that round bend style of hook, where it just has more travel, as you guys can see there, I just put my hand up next to it, where it has more travel, when the fish actually goes to slap at it, you're gonna get a better hook in those fish, and it's gonna be harder for them to get away from it when they do slap at it or just try to kill it and come back and eat it. And so that's really the two styles of treble hooks and where I find I use them the most. Now you start kind of looking at my 1.5s, my jerk baits, stuff like that, you'll see that I have EWG style hooks on a lot of those baits. Let me grab one here. Here's a 6 cents. These actually come equipped with EWG style hooks. So like my square bills, my 1.5s, and even my signature bait from Monster Bass has that hybrid kind of EWG style hook on there. And the reason for that is, for the most part, when we get to the point of the year where the fish are shallow enough that a square bill becomes a viable bait to throw, what happens is they get very intentional in what they're going to eat. And so for the most part, you know, when again that water starts to warm up, I go EWG style. When that water starts to cool down, I go more straight shank. So another thing that I do kind of in those transitions in seasons is really where I determine the diameter of the hook that I'm going to throw. So if you look at, say again, your Spro rock crawler, just because it's laying right here on top, that's a much thinner diameter hook, whereas you look at this jerk bait here, that's a much thicker diameter hook. This happens to be a Mustad 1X strong, 2X short shank EWG treble hook on this jerk bait, whereas this is a Gamakatsu round bend. I'm not exactly sure, but it's just their standard 1X treble hook. And so what happens as, you know, it gets warmer, those fish's metabolism gets just more and more jacked up. The more intentional they get about eating things, obviously the more energy they have to expend, and so they're just going to be stronger, they're going to be faster. At that point in the year, they're probably going to be the biggest that they're going to be, and so they're just mean, they're pissed off, and they can bend out treble hooks. And so having a little bit thicker treble hook, something with a little bit more strength, can be super important, especially when you're fishing around really big fish. You know, Chickamauga is a great example. And it is a place that I've gone and caught a lot of very, very big fish, those 5 to 6 plus pound fish. And having those bigger hooks can mean everything in the world, just because of how big and pissed off and just genetically mad those fish are about everything when they decide to eat. Whereas these fish, you know, these more Highland Reservoir fish, when they're colder, when they're more lethargic, you want a smaller diameter hook for a couple of reasons. Number one, because you don't need that strength like you do when you're dealing with a fish that's a little bit more amped up. But number two, that smaller diameter is more needle-like. In the winter, those fish's mouths get really, really hard because of the colder water. And so you want a smaller, more needle-like diameter hook so that you can get a really good hook into them. You know, instead of cutting or slicing into the fish, it just sticks them, just like a needle does. You know, you want that hook to get up in there, and then you want that barb to do its job to not let it back out. But that thinner, smaller diameter hook is going to do a really good job of just really driving itself in to those colder fish's mouths and being able to get a hook into those fish. And this was actually the exact crankbait that I hooked that gar on. And you guys all know how hard a gar's mouth is and how hard they are to hook. And those little hooks did a really good job of sticking that fish. And I got them right up next to the boat and then just shook them off because I didn't want them in my boat. But that smaller diameter hook, more needle-like, and does a really good job of piercing that fish's mouth and being able to do its job of hooking the fish. Now, let's talk about like worm hooks. So there's really two styles of worm hooks. You've got your EWG style worm hook, and then you've got your more offset worm hook, like you see here, more round bend offset, and then you got your straight shank. And your straight shank is something that I use in a very specific situation and something that I don't use as often as you would use these other hooks. And then obviously you've got like your, you know, Nico and your wacky rig hooks and all those kinds of things, but that's a different video for a different day. Today we're just talking about your hooks that you're gonna use to like rig up Texas rigs and stuff. So as far as what hooks I use for what situation is really going to depend on the bait that I am throwing. So as you guys can see here with my little rage bug, I've got an EWG style hook. And the reason I've got an EWG style hook on here is because it's a bigger, thicker bait. The body of this bait is bigger than, say, a straight tail worm or even a curly tail worm. You know, the diameter of the body of the bait is thicker, it's wider, and so that more EWG style hook like this is going to do a better job of accommodating that bait, and it gives that bait plenty of room to move when a fish does bite it. Because, you know, when you're fishing a Texas rig, you're going to Texpose that hook. You're going to put that hook inside of that bait. Well, as you guys can see there's a lot of travel or distance between that plastic and the shank of that hook. And so when that fish actually bites that and it compresses it, it lets the point of that hook be exposed as best that it can, and it gives that more of a gap there for that hook to actually get into that fish's mouth and for you to get a good hook into that fish. On the inverse of that, with a worm hook, it's a smaller gap. And can you use just standard round bend offset worm hooks with plastics like that? Absolutely. My dad swears by just offset round bends. He doesn't really use anything else, and he is super successful with them. But when you look at a hook like that, again, it's just a smaller hook. It doesn't have that deep belly in it like that other hook does. And so this is going to do a better job of when you're dealing with smaller plastics that aren't as thick, like worms and grubs and things like that, where you don't need as much travel in that hook. And two, with this one, as you guys can see, the point of that hook actually doesn't point back up into the shank like it does on an EWG. So just like your EWGs that we were talking about when we were talking about treble hooks, you guys can see there the point of that hook actually sort of points back towards that shank, and so it creates that kind of trap almost that really helps to get those fish hooked good, and it's harder for them to get off. Whereas this one, it doesn't point back towards the shank, it actually points directly over it, which gives it more travel, more gap, and really helps you to get those fish panned and get them hooked really, really good. And just like hooks that I put on treble hooks, depending on the time of year that I'm fishing is going to depend on the diameter of the hook that I'm going to fish. And so in the summer, you're going to see me using stuff like your straight shanks. You know, when I'm flipping grass, when I'm flipping heavier cover, this is a 3X strong straight shank flipping hook. With the straight shank, obviously it's like all open gap there. I mean, there is nothing to interfere with that point of that hook in any way. Again, does a really good job with those bigger, thicker plastics. You can just really just run that plastic down on there, and then you've just got a straight shot to the point of that hook. But it's thicker. I mean, you can see here, I cannot bend this hook in any direction whatsoever because of how thick of diameter it actually is. Again, when you're dealing with those more amped up fish, those stronger fish, those thicker, stronger hooks are going to be a lot better. Whereas if you look at this little worm hook, I can actually take this thing and flex it, sort of, and you guys can see I can like flex the hook point out just a little bit, and that's because it's a thinner diameter. This is going to be great early in the spring Carolina rig fishing when you're dragging something on the bottom, making really long casts. Smaller diameter, more needle-like point on that thing. It's going to really do a good job of not cutting or doing anything to those fish that would create a hole, but really just driving itself in, just like you would push a needle into somebody's arm. And then once it's in, it's really hard for them to get it out because that barb does its job, and you know, and you're going to keep the pressure on keeping hook. And so really kind of think about the diameter of your hook when you're thinking about fishing. EWG style, again, this is a very thick hook. This is more of a kind of hook that I use in the summer with big worms and stuff like that, like really big worms, like your 10-inch bullworm and all that kind of stuff. Thicker plastic, obviously you want that deeper belly, but that thicker diameter is going to do a really, really good job of not bending out, not, you know, contorting or doing anything in any way that could let those fish break it and or bend it out and you lose those fish. And so yeah, that's hooks in a nutshell. I mean, that's kind of how I look at hooks. So EWG style treble hooks for when they're really intentionally eating it. Thicker diameters for when you know those fish are a little bit more amped up, have got a little bit more power. Round bend for when they're slapping at it as far as treble hooks. And then thinner diameters when you want to be able to really get a hook into those fish, really just like stick it like you would stick a needle and not let those fish get off. And that's kind of my philosophy behind the hooks that I choose and why I choose them. And this was actually a viewer question. You guys left a comment or a question about it, you know, asked about hooks. I think it was on the live stream, and so I thought I would take this time just kind of expound upon this idea now that we're hanging out in the beard barn and kind of talk about the hooks that I put on my baits and why I put them on there. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Just wanted to show you some fish catches, kind of say what's up, give you an update, talk about treble hooks, and hang out in the beard barn. I got like 30-ish more degrees on the chicken and it will be done. Question for you guys is would you want to see a smoking channel, a channel just dedicated to smoking meat that obviously I would run? Now there's a lot of smoking channels out there, but there's also a lot of channels that have to do with bass fishing, and yet here I am. So I might start another channel. I don't know. I enjoy doing that. Do I enjoy it as much as I enjoy bass fishing? Absolutely not. But is it something fun to do when I'm hanging out here in the beard barn with you guys talking about baits and stuff? Absolutely. And I think it would be fun to just kind of do my experience around a channel like that. So if that sounds like something that you would want to see, let me know. But like I say, that is today's video. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really do appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy day to come hang out with me. If you want to check out any of the gear that I talked about, it will be linked down below. Tackle Warehouse affiliate links. Go use them. They really, really do help me out. Got my Tackle Warehouse check just a few weeks ago, and it really just helps to put gas in the boat, into the truck, helps to keep the channel running. Literally, that's what I do with it. I put it right back into the YouTube channel just to keep everything rolling. So I appreciate you guys when you use those links. But as always, you guys are sweet, and thank you for watching.